Hey dudes, and welcome back to The Bants. As always, I am your host, The Bants, and I hope you all enjoyed your weekend, but now of course it is the beginning of the week, so it is time for our first What's Happening in Fashion for the week, so let's just get right into it. And first up, as always, we have our headline for the day, and in our headline of the day, let's talk about Interbrand's list of the world's most valuable brands, shall we? So in case you didn't know, Interbrand does this list every year, going through every kind of company out there. It doesn't matter if we're talking technology, telecommunications, or obviously in this case fashion. They go through all the major companies out there and compile their top 100 list based on not only just size of the company but the growth of the company over the last year as well. And the craziest thing about this year's list specifically is that out of all the major sectors out there, the one increasing the fastest is luxury fashion companies. There are nine luxury fashion companies on this list, which combined have a 42% increase in growth over just last year alone. And it isn't just solely luxury fashion brands on this list. We also saw the inclusion of two major jewelry brands, those of course being Tiffany & Co. and Cartier. But before we dive deeper specifically into the luxury part of this list, let's take a look at some of the other fashion brands on this list as well. Probably as a surprise to no one, there were also athletic brands on the list, specifically the two major ones, those of course being Nike and Adidas, with Nike obviously securing the top spot overall for any fashion brand on the list at 17th. However, on the flip side, there were also two major fast fashion companies on this list, those of course being H&M and Zara. But even though they are on this list, both took major hits to their growth over the last year, with Zara dropping 5% overall and H&M dropping 18% overall. And although this might come as a surprise to some of you out there, with as much as the industry, especially over this last year, has really been pushing that more ethical movement, that more sustainable movement, this actually does make a lot of sense, but obviously can't account for all of it. And truth be told, I could have dove in a little bit deeper into this and explained why H&M is doing so bad, but in all honesty, I don't really fucking care because I fucking hate H&M, and if anything, I'm glad to see this result out of them. Hopefully they're not around much longer, because seriously, fuck fast fashion. But now with those two genres out of the way, let's move back into our discussion about the luxury brands on this list. Now earlier on when I was talking about these brands, I gave you some info on their growth as well as explained that they are the largest growing sector as of right now. And even though those tidbits of information are fairly interesting, if you don't really understand the concepts behind them, then it's just me spouting a lot of big words, which yeah, I kinda am. So to kind of give you an idea of how much the luxury fashion brands are growing, let me kind of give you some simplified facts that are actually pretty crazy. Remember how I said that Nike was by far the biggest fashion brand on this list, ranking in at number 17 out of 100? Well, the next biggest luxury brand on that list is Louis Vuitton, which is 18th on this list, only one rank behind. Then let's take a look at Gucci's growth. Gucci in the last year had a 30% growth overall. That's insane. The only two companies that grew more on this top 100 list in the last year were Netflix and Amazon. Yes, those are the only two companies competing in growth with Gucci. And finally, let's take a look at Chanel, who debuted on this list for the first time ever, mainly because they are a private company and never had decided before to release their financial results. Well, this last year they decided to release those financial results, and where did it put them on the top 100 list of most valuable companies worldwide? It put them in 23rd place. 23rd fucking third place out of the top 100 most valuable companies in the world. Yeah, seems like a pretty good place to start, doesn't it? In fact, the only major luxury fashion / jewelry company on this list that didn't have any growth this year was Burberry, and obviously you can tell why. They've had a lot of moves over the last couple months, but with Riccardo Tisci now helming the brand, it's only really a matter of time just to see exactly how much growth they get next year. But now, of course, this all leads to the question of why are these brands growing so rapidly now as opposed to, over the last couple years, decades that they've been around? Well, there's really a bunch of factors here, so let's break some of them down. The first reason, of course, is a very simple one, and that is just the modernizing of these brands. The acceptance of social media, the acceptance of online shops and their own personal brand e-shops, which many of these companies hadn't had up until very recently. I mean, I think Prada just put out their e-shop this year, so it's only really just those simple factors catching up to these brands finally. Then we have what probably many people consider is the biggest factor in the eyes of probably the majority, and that is just the embracing of the youth, so to speak. Sure, the idea of your favorite sports star or music artist wearing or talking about their favorite designer and luxury brands is nothing new. It's been around for years and years and years, but it's never been so intertwined as it is now. The reason being, once again, that ever since that Supreme Louis Vuitton collaboration, we've really seen a bunch of high-end companies going for very streetwear-esque aesthetics, as well as many people wearing a mixture of both streetwear pieces and high-end pieces, even though it's usually nothing more than a graphic t-shirt from one of these luxury brands. Plus, really don't get me started on the appropriation of the word streetwear in pretty much any genre of fashion now, because if I start to talk about that, we're literally going to be here all night. And some will even attest this to some of the younger designers and other creatives behind these companies, helping push them as far as they are, such as Gucci's Shadow Committee, for example, or once again Riccardo at Burberry, Slimane at Celine, or even Virgil Abloh at Louis Vuitton. Sorry, that statement still makes me throw up a little every single time I have to say it. And even though, yes, definitely all these factors have helped in some way, definitely some much more largely than others, there is still one major factor that many people seem to overlook or just don't want to talk about, even though it is the elephant in the room. So let's talk about it. That is, of course, China. Remember how I talked about earlier how a lot of these luxury fashion houses were slowly starting to modernize in very simplistic ways? Well, included in those factors was being able to open up not only online shops, but also brick and mortars in China, and that has done more than everything else on this list combined, period. You can talk about your refurbished online e-stores and interesting marketing campaigns and shadow committees all you want, but when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, it's really the nouveau rich that's lining these companies' pockets. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I have said it many times on this channel before. Not that there's anyone really huge watching this channel, but if you even are a small company that has an access to China to sell goods, I have said time and time again, do everything you can to sell to China, because you will be making bank. It doesn't matter what the fuck you decide to sell. The only really major problem is just how much of a bitch it's gonna be to all of these companies when China's economy finally bursts, because that's gonna fucking suck. But once again, another story for another time. But with all of that now said, now that I've finally talked your ears off, what's your opinion on all of this? Are you excited to see luxury getting as big and as widespread as it is? Or were you happier with it being a small, more niche market on the flip side? How happy are you all with athletic wear still trudging along and being as big as it has always been? Or how do you guys feel about the kind of slowing down and destabilizing of fast fashion, at least in some of the major companies? Or maybe you have entirely something different to talk about, but whatever it is, I'd like to know. I really want to know what you guys all think about this. But now, of course, with our headline wrapped up, let's move on to our art stories for the day. And first up, Chuck Sperry showed off some of his newest works from his first solo exhibit, and these are just fantastic. When you're taking just the vibes and the colorings from a very kind of 70s psychedelic view and mixing them in with some just amazing layers of patterning and small details, these works are just incredible and definitely worth checking out. And once again, congratulations to Chuck Sperry for your first solo exhibit. It looks amazing. Then Alan Williams showed off some of his newest drawings, and I just love these two. They're just as dark as they are beautiful, and as eerie as they are just fantastic. And I just love the vibes that I'm getting off of these, just their dark tones and their fantasy-esque kind of silhouettes. And if any of that sounds interesting to you as well, these are definitely a must look. And lastly, Cedrix Crespels showed off some of his newest works, and these are just super eye-catching. The amount of pop and color and clean details in these pieces, with some very heavy influences from not only graffiti but also from Cause's art style as well. If any of that is up your alley, then definitely check these out as well. Some really quality pieces here. Alright, so now moving back into our fashion section for the day. First up, the Hundreds showed off their newest collaboration, this time with Stanley Kubrick's renowned movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I absolutely love it. This is a great fucking collaboration. Words I really never ever thought I would say about a Hundreds collaboration, yet here we are. And first up, I really do want to give a shout out to Bobby Hundreds here. I have shit talked your brand for the last 15 years, and I will continue to shit talk it until the day either I die or it dies. But this last year, at least as far as collaborations go, has probably been your best year ever, which is really saying something, but not because of you guys having better collaborations before. You guys haven't. It's just because I'm saying it, and I fucking hate your brand so goddamn much. Has there been bad collaborations this year from the Hundreds? Plenty. But the better ones have definitely outweighed everything else, except for the main line, obviously, because that is still complete garbage. But now moving on to the collection at hand, we see a actually big variety of pieces here, not just t-shirts and long sleeves, but pullovers as well, and even a couple accessories such as a hat and a couple skateboard decks, which I'm actually fairly surprised to see. But even more surprising than this is just seeing the amount of work that went into these pieces, obviously specifically in the graphics here. There's a huge range of different graphics. They're all very interesting graphics because obviously 2001 is a very interesting movie, but the way that they're not only placed on these pieces, but the ones that were chosen for these pieces are all just amazingly well done. Aside from that, the amount of color in these pieces being either a base piece or a graphic, or even in that one all over print, which does look like a dip dye even though it's not, are all super eye-catching and clean and make perfect sense, and they all match and are cohesive in their color schemes. And I am just floored that Bobby Hundreds even knew how to do this based on the last 15 years of work he's had. Okay, I'll stop. Even I realize that I am shit talking a little too hard here. But all in all, for what this collection is and the price this collection is, all I can really say is that if this wasn't the Hundreds, I would 120% buy it. Yes, I'm still a piece of shit. And lastly, brands ClothSurgeon and Monkey Time came together once again for a new collaboration from the duo, and even though it is really good, I do kind of find it bland, unfortunately. Now, don't get me wrong, yes, I did hear your gasps through the screen. I don't think this is necessarily a bad collection, it's just something we've seen from both of them a lot before. Taking a look at the pieces in this collection, we see just really solid work here. I mean, when it comes to ClothSurgeon's designs, you know what to expect in terms of patchwork, be it detailings, aesthetics, pocket placements, so on. And same goes for Monkey Time. We see a lot of their very interesting fabric choices mixed in with some more of their more creative details that you wouldn't normally see on a ClothSurgeon piece, really woven in nicely here. And these pieces are great, but once again, they're just kind of bland, unfortunately. And the reason why I keep saying that is because if you go back and look at a lot of the collaborations that the two brands have done together, be it last season, the season before that, and so on, you get a lot of the same ideas in these pieces. You get even a lot of the same fabrics in these pieces too. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, because obviously, as I said before, if you look at ClothSurgeon's work, you know it's ClothSurgeon's work, because those ideas are so very kind of stapled into the mentality of the brand. But in every season of ClothSurgeon, you do see some form of evolution, be it in either fabrics or designs, along with the stuff that you've known to come and love from the brand. But in these collaborations, I'm not really getting a lot of that evolution. It's just really kind of more of the same. And once again, I have to reiterate, it's not necessarily a bad thing, as the pieces here are super solid in both quality and designs and creativity. It's just that if you were to have bought from the first collection, the last collection, and this collection, and threw it all into your wardrobe, it would pretty much look like a jumble of the same pieces in fabric, and that to me is kind of boring. I know, it's bizarre for as good as it is, but it is what it is in my mind. But if you are somewhat new to this collaboration and you're looking at this with fresh eyes, it's definitely fantastic for what it is. I just wouldn't recommend going back and looking at past collaborations, because it will kind of diminish the amount of creativity you see here. But either way, if you haven't checked out the last collections and are looking for much more interesting kind of hybrid wear, this is definitely a great place to start. And finally, guys, let's move on to our articles for the day. And first up, High Snobiety put out a very nice in-depth article on the kind of woven relationship between hip-hop and streetwear and other forms of fashion. This one really goes back in the day, really taking a lot of history out of the mid to late 80s and even jumping ahead a little bit to the mid-noughts. So if you are a fan of the history of really this kind of fashion that so many of us are into, definitely check this out. Very nice read. Then Hypebeast sat down for an interview with some of the people behind Carnival and Upperground, some of the major streetwear retailers out of Bangkok, Thailand. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about kind of streetwear in other parts of the world and just kind of how it's evolved over there, this is definitely worth a read as well. Then Heddles put out a very nice introductory article into the tools you'll need to get started if you're interested in leatherworking, and it goes through a pretty nice list here, many that you probably already know about, but some others that you might not know about, especially if you're a novice to the subject. So if you've ever been interested in kind of the DIY aspects of fashion, I definitely check into this. And lastly, Griel put out a very nice overview on the semi-rising in popularity brand nowadays, Martine Rose. Even though the brand has definitely been around for a while, already over 10 years. It's still finally coming to prominence in kind of the last year or two, and this does a very nice job of giving you a little bit more history on the backstory of it prior to those years. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more specifically at this brand, I definitely give this a read as well. Alright guys, and with that we reach the end of our first What's Happening in Fashion for the week. I hope you all have enjoyed, and as always, if you want to read any of the articles I talked about today or see any photos from lookbooks I wasn't able to include, I've linked everything in the description down below. And if you are new to the channel, then welcome. We do these What's Happening in Fashion videos twice a week at the beginning and end of the week, plus another occasional video here or there. So if you're interested and want to see more, feel free to subscribe. Otherwise, if you just have any questions, comments, concerns, or even just want to talk fashion in general, feel free to hit me up in the comments. I am always willing to talk fashion. And thank you all once again for watching these videos and supporting my content. I hope you all have a great week until I see you next, and as always, until next time.